Some lives drift like silent birds across a city sky, unnoticed, unnamed, their wings beating against a world too busy to care. In the gritty streets of East Side, a black woman swept away more than litter. She carried a quiet defiance against cruelty. A crippled boy, trapped by a window, watched lives he'd never live, until their paths crossed in a way no one expected. What began with a simple basket sparked a bond that would shatter prejudice and rewrite destinies. Will their story fade like those forgotten birds, or rise to change a town forever? Stick around to find out. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to our channel for the latest stories that move you, and drop a comment to share where you're watching from. Who knows what truths you'll uncover by the end. The city of East Side woke to a gray dawn, its streets exhaling the stale breath of asphalt and yesterday's neglect. Mary Whiston, a black woman in her early 30s, moved through the pre-dawn hush like a shadow with purpose. Her orange sanitation vest caught the flicker of streetlights, a defiant flare against the gloom. Her broom, worn at the edges but steady, in her calloused hands scraped against the pavement, gathering cigarette butts, crumpled wrappers, and the weight of a town's indifference. This was her battlefield, these cracked sidewalks where prejudice struck as often as litter. "Keep it clean, girl," a white shopkeeper barked from his doorway, tossing a coffee cup at her feet with a smirk. The words stung, sharp as broken glass, but Mary's face remained a mask of resolve. She swept the cup into her cart, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the first threads of sunrise promised a fleeting reprieve. East Side was no kind of place. Its brick buildings sagged under decades of wear, their windows like tired eyes watching the world pass. The townsfolk, mostly white, carried their biases openly, some in sneers, others in the casual cruelty of tossed garbage. Mary had learned to navigate their scorn, her heart armored by a quiet faith that small acts could outlast hate. Her route wound past the Mercy Home, a shelter for disabled children, its facade as faded as the hopes it housed. The building loomed. Over the street, its second-floor windows smudged with time, staring blankly at the apartments opposite. Mary barely noticed it at first, her focus on the rhythm of her work. Sweep, step, sweep, step. But one October morning, a chill in the air and an ache in her bones, something made her pause. She looked up, and there he was, a boy, no older than 10, his pale face pressed to a second-floor window of the Mercy Home. His wheelchair was a dark silhouette against the glass, his body small and twisted, as if the world had folded him too tightly. His eyes, though, burned with a hunger that stopped Mary cold. They weren't the eyes of a child resigned to his cage. They were alive, darting across the street to the apartments opposite, drinking in lives he'd never live. Mary followed. His gaze. In one window, a couple argued, their hands slicing the air. In another, a father knelt to tie his daughter's shoe, her laughter a silent spark. The boy watched it all, his lips parted, as if he could taste the freedom of those moments. Mary's chest tightened. She knew that look. It was the ache of being unseen, the longing to belong to a world that turned its back. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story. But she knew he was white, and in East Side that alone might have made him her enemy. Yet something deeper stirred, a memory of her childhood, of being dismissed, of standing on the outside of laughter and warmth. Mary turned back to her cart, her hands trembling slightly. She couldn't fix his world, couldn't undo the cruelty that bound them both to this town, but she could do something. She rummaged through her bag, pulling out a small paper sack. Inside, she placed an apple, its skin glossy despite the morning's chill, and a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She hesitated, then tore a scrap from her notebook and scrawled a note. "You're part of this world, kid." Folding it carefully, she tucked it beside the apple. The Mercy Home's fire escape was rusted but sturdy, a relic of forgotten safety drills. Mary glanced around. No one watched. Not at this hour. She climbed the first few steps, her boots clanging softly, and found a loose pipe near the boy's window. With a piece of rope from her cart, she rigged a wicker basket she'd scavenged from a thrift store, tying it to the pipe like a crude pulley. She placed the sack inside, tugged the rope, and watched the basket rise, swaying slightly until it hovered just outside the boy's window. Her heart pounded, not from fear of being caught, but from the audacity of hope. Would he take it? Would he even see it? She stepped back, her breath visible in the cold, and waited. Minutes passed, slow and heavy. Then movement. The boy's thin hands appeared, fumbling with the window's latch. It creaked open, and he leaned forward, his eyes wide with curiosity. He grasped the basket, pulling it inside with a care that spoke of reverence. Mary held her breath as he opened the sack, his fingers tracing the note before he tucked it into his pocket. He looked down, searching the street, and their eyes met for a fleeting second. No words, no wave, just a nod, small but certain, like a pact sealed in silence. Mary nodded back, her lips curving into a rare smile, and turned to her broom, the weight of the morning lighter somehow. The next day she returned, her heart a mix of nerves and resolve. The basket hung empty, a sign he'd taken her gift. She placed another sack inside, a granola bar, a used pencil, another note. Keep looking out, kid. You see more than they know. As she swept, she glanced up. The boy was there, his face brighter, now, holding something against the glass. It was a drawing, crude but vivid. A golden sun over a stick figure woman with a broom, her orange vest a splash of color. Mary's throat tightened. She raised a hand, not quite a wave, and he mirrored her, his smile a spark in the dawn's gray light. In that moment, East Side's cruelty faded, and the street felt less like a battlefield. They were two souls, unseen by the world, seeing each other. And that, Mary knew, was a beginning. The streets of East Side carried a pulse of their own, a rhythm of footsteps and muttered slurs that Mary Whiston had learned to drown out. Each dawn, she donned her orange vest, its fluorescent glow a quiet rebellion against the town's gray disdain. Her broom scraped against the pavement, sweeping away soda cans, cigarette stubs, and the sharp edges of prejudice that clung to her like dust. The ritual with the boy at the Mercy home had become her anchor, a wicker basket tied to a rusted pipe, carrying small gifts to a second-floor window. An apple, a notebook, a note in her careful script, "You're stronger than you know." In return, Ryan's crayon drawings, vivid bursts of color depicting her as a hero, the city as a canvas, lit a spark in her chest. Their silent exchange was a secret kept from a world that judged too quickly. But secrets, in East Side, had a way of drawing eyes. Mary's supervisor, Carl, was a man carved from spite, his wiry frame and pinched face a fixture of her mornings. He patrolled her route like a vulture, his clipboard a weapon. "Whiston, you're loitering again," he snapped one frost-bitten November morning, his breath clouding the air. She'd paused to adjust the basket's rope, ensuring it reached Ryan's window. Carl's eyes narrowed, catching the movement. "What's that, huh? Handing out trash to bums?" His voice dripped with venom, the word "you people" unspoken, but heavy. Mary straightened, her jaw tight. "Just cleaning, sir," she said, her tone flat, betraying none of the fire in her gut. He scribbled on his clipboard, docking her pay, $10 for idling. It was the third fine that week, each one a reminder that her skin was reason enough for punishment. She swallowed the sting and swept on, the basket's weight a quiet defiance against his cruelty. The townsfolk were no kinder, a group of teenagers. Their laughter sharp as broken bottles lingered near her cart one afternoon. "Hey, cleaner lady," one called, a white boy with a smirk, tossing a half-eaten hot dog at her feet. It landed with a wet slap, mustard smearing the pavement. His friends howled, their eyes gleaming with the thrill of cruelty. Mary's hands tightened on her broom, her heart pounding, but she kept her gaze steady. She swept the mess into a pile, each stroke a silent vow. "You don't break me." An older woman passing by clucked her tongue, muttering, "Some people don't know their place." Mary heard it, felt it like a slap, but she didn't falter. She'd learned long ago that anger only fed their hate, and she refused to give them the satisfaction. At the Mercy home, trouble brewed in softer tones but cut just as deep. Ryan waited each morning, his wheelchair a sentinel by the window, his thin fingers trembling with anticipation as the basket rose. Mary's gifts, a pack of colored pencils, a second-hand comic book, a note reading "Your drawings light up the world," were lifelines in his confined existence. He poured his heart into his art, sketching Mary as a superhero, her broom a staff, the streets glowing under her care. Each drawing, held against the glass, was a thank you, a bridge between their worlds. But Evelyn, a caretaker with lips perpetually pursed, had begun to notice. A white woman in her 50s, Evelyn carried a distrust as old as East Side itself. She'd seen the basket swaying outside Ryan's window, caught the boys' eager glances at the street below. "What's she after?" she muttered to a colleague, her voice low but venomous. "People like her always want something." 1. Gray afternoon, as Ryan clutched a new sketch, a flower garden with Mary at its center. Evelyn stormed into his room. "Enough of this nonsense," she snapped, her eyes flicking to the basket's rope outside. Ryan froze, his drawing slipping to his lap. "That woman's trouble," Evelyn said, her tone sharp with accusation. "Probably scheming, using you for God knows what. Her kind always do." The words landed like blows, but Ryan's voice, soft and unsteady, pushed back. "She's nice, she gives me things," Evelyn scoffed, yanking the curtain shut with a force that rattled the frame. "Stop wasting time on dreams, boy. You're here to get better, not play games with strangers." She gathered his gifts, the pencils, the comic, the notes, and tossed them into a storage closet, locking it with a click that echoed like a slammed door. Ryan's eyes welled, but he bit his lip, silent, his world dimmed by the heavy fabric. Blocking the street. Mary sensed the shift, though she didn't know its source. The next morning, Ryan's window was dark, the curtains drawn tight. Her heart sank, but she refused to stop. She arrived earlier, before Carl's shift, when the streets were still cloaked in pre-dawn quiet. She filled the basket, a granola, bar, a toy car, a note, "I'm still here, kid," and sent it up, her fingers lingering on the rope as if it could carry her resolve to him. Hours later, as she swept nearby, a flicker of movement caught her eye. The curtain parted just an inch, and Ryan's face appeared, pale but determined. He held up a new drawing, a single red flower, its petals bold against a gray sky. His eyes found hers, and for a moment the world shrank to that shared glance, a promise that neither Carl's fines nor Evelyn's suspicion could sever. That evening, Mary lingered longer than usual, her cart parked beneath a flickering streetlight. The Mercy home loomed silent, its windows like closed eyes, but Ryan's was different. The curtain, still cracked open, glowed faintly from a lamp inside. She imagined him there, clutching her note, his fingers smudged with crayon. Another drawing appeared, pressed against the glass. Mary, her vest a beacon, standing tall amid a city of stars. Her throat tightened, a mix of pride and defiance swelling in her chest. Carl could fine her. Evelyn could lock away the gifts. The town could spit its venom, but they couldn't touch this fragile, fierce connection forged in silence. She nodded to the window, a vow to keep going, and pushed her cart into the dusk, the drawing stars burning bright in her mind. East Sides. Cruelty hadn't softened, but Mary's resolve had hardened. She'd face Carl's clipboard, the teenager's taunts, the whispers that followed her like shadows. She'd climb the fire escape in the dark, tie the basket with hands that ached but never wavered. And Ryan, behind his curtain, would keep drawing, keep reaching for her through the glass. They were two souls in a town that refused to see them, bound by a rope and a promise. As Mary walked home, the cold biting her cheeks, she felt the weight of the day, but also its light. A light that came from a boy's crayon, and a note that said, without words, "I see you too." Spring crept into East Side like a hesitant guest, softening the air with blossoms and a fragile warmth that barely touched the town's hardened edges. Mary Whiston moved through her dawn routine, her broom a steady metronome against the pavement. her orange vest a beacon in the fading dark. The streets, littered with the usual debris, soda cans, wrappers, and the occasional insult, felt heavier, now, weighted by the rhythm she'd built with the boy at the Mercy home. Each morning, she tied her wicker basket to the rusted pipe, filling it with small offerings. A pear, a pack of crayons, a note in her neat script. Your art makes the world brighter. Ryan's drawings, flashed through the cracked curtain, were her reward. Vivid scenes of her as a guardian of the city, her broom a scepter, the streets alive with color. Their silent bond had become a lifeline, a defiance against the town's cruelty, but Eastside had a way of snatching even the smallest lights. It was an April morning, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth, when Mary first felt the shift. She sent the basket up as always, her fingers lingering on the rope, a quiet prayer that Ryan would be there. But the window stayed dark, the curtain unmoved, no pale face pressed to the glass. Her heart stuttered, but she brushed it off. Maybe he was sleeping. Maybe Evelyn had caught him again. She swept her route, her eyes darting to the Mercy home with every pass, waiting for the curtain's flicker. Hours later, the basket hung untouched, its contents a silent accusation. Marie's chest tightened, a cold dread coiling beneath her ribs. She told herself he'd appear tomorrow, that this was just a pause, but the street felt emptier, the dawn grayer. The next day, the window remained blank. No drawing, no glance, just a pane of glass reflecting the sky's indifference. Mary's hands shook as she tied the basket, her note simpler this time. I'm here, kid, always. She waited, her broom idle, her breath shallow, but the curtain didn't stir. Carl, her supervisor, caught her lingering. Whiston, move it, he barked, his clipboard poised like a guillotine. Daydreaming's for folks who can afford it. His sneer carried the old venom, but Mary barely heard him. She nodded, swept, and moved on, her mind fixed on the empty window. By the third day, the dread had hardened into fear. The basket's contents, a granola bar, a toy soldier, a note, went unclaimed, swaying in the breeze like a forgotten flag. Mary's steps slowed, her eyes locked on the Mercy home, its brick facade now a wall between her and answers. On the fourth day, she couldn't wait any longer. She parked her cart under a sagging streetlight and crossed to the Mercy home's trance, her heart pounding against the weight of her vest. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and neglect, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies. At the front desk, a receptionist sorted papers, her face etched with exhaustion. I need to know about the boy, Mary said, her voice steady but urgent. Second floor by the window. Where is he? The woman barely looked up, her pen scratching. Transferred, another facility, that's all I know. The words landed like stones, cold and final. Where? Mary pressed, leaning forward. No details, the receptionist said, her tone clipped. Privacy rules. Mary stood frozen, the air too thick to breathe. No address, no name, no trace. Ryan was gone. She returned to her cart, her legs heavy as if the pavement had turned to mud. The basket hung limp against the brick wall, a relic of a promise now broken. She untied it, her fingers fumbling, and clutched it to her chest, and the ray, wicker creaking under her grip. The street stretched before her, its litter a mockery of her loss. Had she failed him? Were her gifts, her apples, her notes too small against his loneliness? The questions clawed at her, but answers didn't come. She swept mechanically, her broom scraping louder now, as if it could drown the ache. Carl's fines, the townsfolk's, taunts, a tossed soda can, a muttered slur faded to a dull hum. The world had taken Ryan, and Mary felt its weight in every step. Weeks bled into one another. Mary kept sweeping past the Mercy home, her eyes drifting to the blank window, now just another smudged pane in a row of forgotten faces. The absence gnawed, a quiet grief she carried like a stone in her pocket. She wondered if Ryan still drew, if he kept her notes, if he remembered the woman who'd seen him when no one else did. The basket stayed in her cart, untouched, its rope coiled like a memory she couldn't release. At night, in her small apartment, she'd sit by the window, staring at the city's jagged skyline, and feel the ache of his absence. She didn't cry. Mary hadn't cried in years, but her hands, usually so steady, trembled when she thought of him. Yet she didn't stop. Eastside's cruelty hadn't softened, but neither had Mary's resolve. She poured her energy into others, sharing her meager earnings with a neighbor's hungry kids, mending clothes for a single mother, and volunteering at a food pantry after her shift. Her kindness was a rebellion, a way to honor the boy who'd drawn her as a hero. One evening, as she handed a sandwich to a man shivering outside the pantry, he nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "You're good people, Miss Mary," he said, his voice rough but warm. She smiled, faint but real, and felt a flicker of Ryan's light in the exchange. It wasn't enough to fill the void, but it was enough to keep her moving. The Mercy home loomed on her route, a daily reminder of what she'd lost. She no longer climbed the fire escape, tied the basket, but she couldn't stop looking up. One rainy afternoon, as water soaked her vest and blurred the streets, she paused beneath the window. The curtain was gone, replaced by a bare pane, and, for a moment, she saw Ryan's face, not real, but a ghost of memory, his eyes bright with hope. She blinked and it was just glass again, streaked with rain. "Keep drawing, kid," she whispered, her voice lost in the downpour. She pushed her cart forward, the wheels rattling, and swept on, her heart heavy but unbroken. Eastside hadn't changed. Its slurs, its litter, its cold indifference remained. But Mary had. The empty window had carved a space in her, a reminder that even the smallest connections could wound when severed. Yet it also fueled her, a quiet fire that burned through the town's scorn. She'd lost Ryan, but she hadn't lost herself. Her broom moved with purpose, her hands steady once more, carrying the weight of a promise she'd keep even if he never knew. In the gray dawn, Mary Whiston swept, not just the streets, but the shadows of a world that tried to erase her. And, somewhere she hoped, a boy still held her note, its words a tether to a woman who'd seen him, if only for a moment. Time in Eastside flowed like a sluggish river, carving deeper grooves into the town's cracked sidewalks and Mary Whiston's weathered hands. Now in her late 40s, her hair flecked with gray, Mary swept the streets with the same dogged rhythm, her orange vest a faded flag against the dawn's gray veil. The ache of Ryan's absence, that boy by the Mercy home's window, had dulled, but never vanished, a stone lodged in her heart. His empty window haunted her route, its blank glass a mirror for the questions she couldn't answer. Did he still draw? Did her notes, tucked beneath his pillow, survive the years? She carried the wicker basket in her cart, untouched, its rope coiled like a memory too heavy to unravel. Yet Mary pressed on, her broom scraping the pavement, each stroke a defiance, against a town that still spat its venom. Eastside had changed, but only on its surface. Coffee shops and boutiques sprouted where pawn shops once festered, their polished signs a veneer over the town's old prejudices. Carl, her spiteful supervisor, had retired, replaced by a younger man, Daniels, whose indifference was less personal, but no less cutting. "Keep up, Whiston," he'd mutter, his eyes skimming past her as if she were part of the litter. The CEO. Townsfolk's slurs had softened into polite avoidance, but Mary felt their weight in sidelong glances, in the way doors closed a beat too quickly. A group of teenagers once tossed a soda can her way, their laughter softer now, but the act was the same, a reminder that her skin marked her as other. She swept it up, her jaw tight, her heart armored by decades of enduring. Her life was not just survival, it was creation. Mary poured herself into Eastside's forgotten corners, her kindness a quiet rebellion. After her shifts, she volunteered at the community center, ladling soup for hungry families, her hands steady despite the ache in her joints. She mended clothes for a single mother down the block, tutored kids in a cramped library room, and shared her meager pay with neighbors who had less. Her apartment, small and sparsely furnished, became a haven for those in need. a place for a hot meal, a kind word, a moment of being seen. "Miss Mary, you're a saint," an old man said one evening, clutching a patched coat she'd fixed. She shook her head, her smile faint. "Just doing what's right," she said, but his gratitude warmed the hollow where Ryan's memory lived. Luna, her daughter, was Mary's light. Now in her mid-20s, Luna had her mother's eyes, deep, searching, unyielding, and a fire, all her own. A social worker, she spent her days advocating for East Side's vulnerable, her clipboard a shield against the system's neglect. She'd grown up watching Mary sweep through scorn, and that strength had shaped her. Evenings they'd sit in Mary's kitchen, the air thick with the scent of stew and laughter. "Mama, you're gonna wear yourself out," Luna teased one night, stirring a pot while Mary chopped onions. "Somebody's gotta keep this town human," Mary replied, her voice soft but firm. Luna's pride was unspoken, but it shone in her glance, a daughter's love for a mother who'd built a life from resilience. Mary rarely spoke of Ryan. His name felt like a bruise, tender to the touch. The basket, stored in her closet, was a relic she couldn't bear to discard. Sometimes, sweeping past the Mercy home, she'd glance up, half expecting a drawing in the window. A sun, a flower, her silhouette. The glass stayed bare, but the memory of his eyes, bright with hunger for the world, lingered. She wondered if he'd found a family, if he'd kept her notes, if he'd ever think of the woman who'd tied a rope to his window. The questions were a quiet ache, but they didn't stop her. They fueled her, a reminder that even fleeting connections could leave marks deep enough to endure. Her work earned her a quiet legend in East Side. Not fame, Mary shunned attention, but respect, carved from consistency. Neighbors called her Miss Mary, their voices warm, a stark contrast to the slurs of her youth. A child once slipped her a drawing at the community center, a stick figure woman with a broom haloed in yellow. Mary's breath caught, the image so like Ryan's it stung. She tucked it into her wallet next to a faded note she'd written. "Long ago. You're part of this world, kid." The drawing and the note were talismans, proof that her kindness rippled, even if she couldn't see where it landed. The Mercy home remained a fixture on her route, its brick facade softened by time, but no less imposing. She no longer paused beneath its windows, but her eyes betrayed her, drifting upward as if drawn by a ghost. One spring evening, as the sky burned orange and the air carried the scent of blooming jasmine, she stopped. The second-floor window was open, a new curtain fluttering in the breeze. A child's laughter drifted down, not Ryan's, but it stirred the same ache. Mary gripped her broom, her knuckles whitening. "Keep shining, kid," she whispered, not to the child above, but to the boy she'd lost. She turned away, her cart's wheels rattling, and swept on, the street a canvas for her quiet defiance. East Side's gentrification brought new faces, new tensions. A boutique owner once complained about vagrants near her shop, her eyes flicking to Mary as if she were part of the problem. Mary met her gaze, unflinching, and kept sweeping. The woman looked away, her cheeks flushing, but the moment was a reminder. Prejudice didn't vanish. It just changed its mask. Yet Mary's resolve grew stronger, tempered by years of standing tall. She wasn't just cleaning streets. She was carving space for dignity, for herself and those East Side overlooked. Her hands, now stiff with early arthritis, moved with purpose, each sweep a vow to keep going, to keep giving, to keep seeing. Luna noticed the toll. "Mama, you don't have to save everyone," she said one night, her voice gentle but firm. They were folding blankets for a clothing drive, the kitchen table cluttered with donations. Mary paused, her eyes distant. "I'm not saving anyone," she said. "I'm just making sure they're seen." Luna nodded, understanding more than words could carry. They worked in silence, their hands mirroring each other, a mother and daughter bound by a shared mission. Mary thought of Ryan then, unbidden, his face flickering in her mind like a half-remembered dream. She didn't know where he was, but she hoped he was seen, hoped someone else had tied a basket to his window. The years had worn Mary, but they hadn't broken her. Her body ached, her steps slowed, but her heart burned with the same fire that had led her to Ryan's window. East Side could change its streets, its shops, its faces, but it couldn't change her. She swept, she gave, she loved, and in doing, so she kept a promise to a boy she might never see again. The Mercy home loomed in the dawn, its windows glinting with the first light, and Mary walked past, her broom steady, her spirit unbroken. She was Miss Mary, the woman who saw the unseen, and that was enough to carry her through the years. The November air in Eastside carried a crisp edge, sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter's bite. Mary Whiston, now 59, her hair a crown of gray woven into tight braids, stood in the cluttered warmth of a charity hub, sorting blankets with hands stiffened by arthritis but steady with purpose. Her orange vest hung on a hook, replaced by a worn sweater, but her presence, quiet, unyielding, still commanded the room. Decades of sweeping streets and serving the forgotten had etched lines into her face, each one a testament to a life spent defying East Side's scorn. The memory of Ryan, the boy by the Mercy home's window, had faded to a soft ache, tucked away like a letter read too often. She no longer looked for his drawings in the second-floor glass, but his absence lingered, a quiet echo in the rhythm of her days. The hub buzzed with volunteers, their voices a low hum over the clatter of donation boxes. Mary folded a quilt, her fingers tracing its frayed edges when a shadow fell across her work table. She looked up, expecting another volunteer, but instead met a man in his late 20s, his frame lean and poised in a sleek wheelchair. His face, sharp cheekbones, eyes bright with purpose, stirred something deep, like a half-remembered dream. He wore a navy coat, its collar turned up against the chill, and his hands rested on a worn sketchbook, its edges curled with age. "Miss Mary?" he asked, his voice soft but sure, carrying a warmth that cut through the room's noise. She paused, her brow furrowing, the name a spark in the fog of years. "Do I know you?" she said, her tone cautious, her heart quickening. He smiled, a slow curve that lit his face and opened the sketchbook. The pages crackled, revealing a drawing. A golden sun over a stick figure woman in an orange vest, her broom a beacon against a crayon city. Mary's breath caught, her hands freezing on the quilt. She knew that sun, that broom, those bold, childlike lines. "It's me, Ryan," he said, his eyes searching hers. "The boy from the window." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water, rippling through her chest. She stared, her mind racing to bridge the gap between the frail child of memory and the man before her. His face held traces of that boy, those hungry eyes, that quiet resolve. But time had carved him into something new, something whole. "Ryan," she whispered, testing the name, her voice thick with disbelief. He nodded, his smile widening, and turned the sketchbook's pages. Each drawing was a piece of their past. Mary as a superhero, her vest glowing. A flower garden with her at its center. A city of stars where she stood tall. "I kept them all," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Your notes too, they got me through." Mary's eyes stung, a rare crack in her armor. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the drawings, afraid to touch them, afraid they'd dissolve. Like a dream. "You're here," she said, more to herself than to him, her heart swelling with a joy she hadn't felt in years. He told his story, his words painting a life she'd never imagined. After his transfer from the Mercy home, the Collymore family had adopted him, seeing past his wheelchair to the fire in his soul. They'd nurtured his art, sent him to school, cheered his first gallery show. Now a painter, his canvases, vibrant, soulful tributes to the unseen, hung in galleries across the state. He pulled out his phone, showing her photos of his latest exhibit, a woman with a broom haloed in light against a city skyline, a boy at a window watching lives unfold. "This is you," he said, pointing to the woman. "You kept me going, Miss Mary. Your basket, your notes, they made me believe I was more than my chair." Mary's throat tightened, her vision blurring. "I'm so proud," she whispered, the words heavy with a love she'd carried for decades. Their reunion drew eyes, volunteers pausing to watch the quiet intensity of the moment. Mary didn't notice. She was lost in Ryan's voice, in the drawings that bridged their years apart. He spoke of his work, of painting the lives he'd once watched from that window, of giving voice to those East Side forgot. "I never forgot. You," he said, his hand resting on the sketchbook. "You saw me when no one else did." Mary nodded, her fingers finally touching the drawing of the sun, its warmth real beneath her skin. The ache of his absence, carried so long, began to ease, replaced by a fullness she hadn't known she needed. As they spoke, the hub's door swung open, and Luna Whiston stepped in, her social worker's badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. In her early 30s, Luna carried her mother's strength and a warmth all her own, her braids swinging as she scanned the room. She spotted Mary and the stranger, her curiosity piqued by her mother's rapt expression. "Mama!" she called, crossing the room. Mary turned, her face alight with a rare glow. "Luna, come meet someone," she said, her voice steady but trembling with pride. Ryan extended a hand, his smile open. "I'm Ryan," he said. "Your mama changed my life." Luna listened, her eyes widening as Ryan recounted their story. The basket, the drawings, the notes that tethered a lonely boy to the world. He showed her the sketchbook, its pages a testament to Mary's quiet heroism. Luna's heart swelled, her admiration for her mother deepening with every word. She saw in Ryan a reflection of Mary's resilience, a man who'd turned pain into beauty, just as her mother had turned scorn into kindness. "You're incredible," Luna said to Ryan, then turned to Mary. "And you, Mama. Why didn't you tell me?" Mary shrugged, her smile soft. "Didn't seem like a story worth telling," she said, but her eyes shone with the weight of it. The three sat together, the hub's noise fading to a hum. Ryan shared more, his struggles, his triumphs, his dream to paint for those who felt invisible. Luna spoke of her work, of fighting for East Side's marginalized, her passion echoing Mary's. A spark kindled between them, a shared reverence for the woman who'd shaped them both. Ryan pulled out a card, his next gallery opening scrawled on it. "Come," he said, his eyes meeting Luna's, then Mary's. "It'd mean everything to have you there." Luna nodded, slipping the card into her pocket, her smile bright. Mary watched them, her heart full, the years of carrying Ryan's memory now a bridge to this moment. As Ryan wheeled away, promising to stay in touch, Mary stood still, the sketchbook's weight lingering in her mind. The hub resumed its bustle, but she felt apart from it, anchored by a joy that felt like sunlight after a long night. Luna touched her arm. "You okay, Mama?" she asked, her voice gentle. Mary nodded, her eyes distant but warm. "Better than okay," she said. Outside, East Side street stretched gray and familiar, but something had shifted. Mary stepped into the dusk, her step lighter, the ghost of Ryan's window no longer a wound but a promise kept. She'd seen him, and he'd seen her, and that was a beginning she hadn't dared hope for. East Side's winter draped the town in a shroud of frost, its streets glinting under streetlights like shards of broken glass. Mary Whiston, now 60, moved more slowly through her days, her body worn by decades of sweeping and giving, but her spirit burned bright, a beacon in the cold. Her apartment, a modest haven on the edge of town, hummed with warmth as she welcomed Luna and Ryan into her life's rhythm. The reunion with Ryan, the boy from the Mercy Home's window, had rekindled a light in Mary, softening the ache of years spent wondering. Luna, her daughter, and Ryan, now a celebrated painter, had become constants, their presence a tapestry of laughter and shared purpose. Yet beneath the joy, a shadow loomed. Mary's health was faltering, her breath shorter, her hands trembling with a weariness she could no longer hide. Ryan's gallery openings were a ritual, their glow a contrast to East Side's gray. His canvases, alive with the stories of the unseen, drew crowds, but he always sought Mary's nod, her quiet approval his North Star. Luna, in her early 30s, her social worker's badge a badge of her fight, found herself lingering after these events, drawn to Ryan's warmth, his resilience. Their conversations stretched late, weaving through art, justice, and the woman who'd shaped them both. "Mama's a force," Luna said one night, her voice soft over coffee in a dimly lit cafe. Ryan nodded, his eyes distant. "She saw me when I was nothing but a shadow." Their shared reverence for Mary sparked something deeper, a connection, rooted in values forged in hardship. Love bloomed, steady and unspoken, like a river finding its course. Sunday dinners at Mary's apartment became sacred. The kitchen, fragrant with stew and cornbread, rang with laughter as Ryan teased Luna about her overcooked rice, his wheelchair tucked close to the table. Mary, her braids streaked with more gray, watched them with a smile that held both pride and a quiet ache. "You two," she'd say, shaking her head, her voice a mix of amusement and warning. She saw the spark between them, the way Luna's eyes softened when Ryan spoke of his latest painting, the way Ryan's hand lingered when passing Luna the salt. Their bond, built on her legacy, was a gift, but it came with a pang. She knew. Her time was waning, her coughs sharper, her strength ebbing like a tide. Mary's health declined swiftly, a thief in the night. Arthritis had long plagued her, but now a persistent cough rattled her chest, each breath a battle. Luna noticed first, her social worker's eye catching the pallor in her mother's face. "Mama, you need a doctor," she urged, her voice tight with worry. Mary waved her off, her smile stubborn. "I'm fine, child, just old bones." But Ryan saw it too, his artist's gaze reading the lines of fatigue Mary couldn't hide. He'd bring her tea, insist on carrying dishes, his quiet care a mirror of the notes she'd once sent to his window. Mary accepted their concern with grace, but her heart was heavy. She didn't want to burden the two people she loved most. One winter evening, the air thick with the scent of snow, Mary sat in her armchair, a quilt draped over her knees. Luna and Ryan were there, the room lit by a single lamp, its glow casting soft shadows. Mary's breathing was shallow, her hands folded in her lap. "You two keep shining," she said, her voice a whisper, her eyes bright despite the weight of her body. Luna knelt beside her, her hand gripping Mary's, tears brimming. "Mama, don't talk like that." Ryan, his wheelchair close, reached for Mary's other hand, his touch steady. "You're our light, Miss Mary," he said, his voice breaking. Mary smiled, a radiant curve that held a lifetime of love. "I've seen enough," she said. "You carry it now." Her eyes closed, her breath stilled, and she slipped away, her hand warm in theirs, her spirit a quiet flame extinguished. The room was silent, the weight of loss a physical thing. Luna's sobs broke the stillness, her face buried in Mary's quilt. Ryan, tears streaming, held her hand, his grief a mirror to hers. They sat there, tethered by love and loss, until dawn painted the sky in hues Mary would have loved. Her passing left a void, but it also left a charge, a call to honor the woman who'd seen them when the world hadn't. They buried her in a small cemetery on East Side's edge, the service simple but crowded with neighbors, volunteers, and those she'd touched. Luna spoke, her voice steady through tears, of a mother who'd swept away more than litter, who'd built a life from kindness. Ryan, silent, placed a drawing on her grave. A woman with a broom, haloed in light, a basket, at her feet. Grief bound Luna and Ryan closer. Their love, already deep, became a refuge, a way to carry Mary's light. Months later, they married in a community center, the space adorned with wildflowers and candlelight, a nod to Mary's simplicity. The ceremony was small, intimate, and every vow was woven with her memory. At the reception, Ryan unveiled a painting, his hands trembling as he pulled back the cloth. It showed Mary, her broom a scepter, a basket at her feet, a boy at a window, their silhouettes glowing against a city skyline. The crowd gasped, some weeping, sensing the story's weight. "For Miss Mary," Ryan said, his voice strong, "who taught us to see." Luna, her wedding dress soft against her skin, took his hand, her eyes shining with pride and love. The painting was a vow, a promise to live as Mary had, boldly, kindly, unapologetically. The night stretched on, the community center alive with music and stories of Mary. Neighbors shared memories, the coat she'd mended, the meal she'd shared, the way she'd listened when no one else would. Luna and Ryan moved among them, not as hosts, but as witnesses to a legacy larger than themselves. As they danced, slow and close, Luna whispered, "She's here, isn't she?" Ryan nodded, his eyes on the painting. "Always will be." The moment was bittersweet, a celebration laced with loss, but it was also a beginning. Mary's life, her love, her fight, lived in them, in the hands they held, in the future they'd build. East Side's winter held no mercy, but that night, warmth reigned. The community center glowed, a beacon in the dark, much like Mary had been. Luna and Ryan, now one, stood under the painting, their silhouettes echoing its lines. They'd lost her, but they'd found each other, and in that union Mary's spirit endured. The music faded, the candles burned low, and as guests drifted into the night, Luna touched the painting's frame, her fingers lingering on the basket. "We'll keep it going, Mama," she whispered. Ryan squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with resolve. In that moment, they were more than a couple. They were carriers of a light that refused to dim, a light born from a woman who'd seen the world and loved it anyway. Eastside's spring unfurled in hesitant bursts, its streets softened by blossoms but still scarred by the weight of its past. Ryan and Luna, now bound by marriage and a shared vow to honor Mary Whiston, moved through the town with a purpose that felt like a pulse. Mary's death had left a void, a silence where her steady presence once stood, but it had also ignited a fire. Her life, decades of sweeping streets, tying baskets to windows and giving to those East Side forgot, demanded more than memory. It demanded action. Ryan, his wheelchair a quiet companion, painted with a ferocity born of grief, his canvases a tribute to the unseen. Luna, her social worker's badge a shield, fought for the marginalized with a resolve that echoed her mother's. Together they carried Mary's light, determined to make it a beacon for a town that had too long lived in shadow. The idea for the Whiston Fund came in the quiet months after their wedding, born over coffee in their small apartment, Mary's quilt draped over the couch like a silent partner. "Mama didn't save people," Luna said, her voice steady but fierce. "She saw them. We need to do that, create a place where no one's invisible." Ryan nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of a sketchbook, its pages still holding Mary's son. "A space for kids like me, for people like her," he said. "Art, food, dignity, no strings attached." They envisioned not a shelter, not a charity with forms and conditions, but a haven where anyone could sit, eat, create, and be. The Whiston Fund would be Mary's legacy, a living testament to a woman who'd turned scorn into grace. They started small, renting a vacant lot near East Side's community center, a dusty patch framed by rusted fences and overgrown weeds. The land was forgotten, much like the people Mary had loved, but Luna saw its potential, its openness a canvas for hope. Ryan rallied his artist friends. Luna called on her network of activists, and together they cleared the lot, their hands blistered, but hearts alight. With donated wood and borrowed tools, they built a simple structure, an open-air pavilion with long tables, sturdy chairs, and a roof to shield against rain. It wasn't polished, but it was honest, its wooden beams echoing Mary's unadorned strength. They named it the Quiet Table, a nod to the bench where Ryan once sat, to the basket that had tethered him to her. The first day, they served 12 people, older men with weathered faces, 2 women clutching thin coats, a young girl with dirt on her knees and a shy smile. Luna ladled chili, Ryan sliced cornbread, their movements a dance of purpose. No forms, no names, just food and space, offered with the same quiet conviction Mary had carried. Word spread, slow but steady, like a river carving stone. Veterans came first, drawn by whispers of a place that didn't judge. Some spoke, sharing stories of wars and losses. Others sat in silence, their presence enough. Luna listened. Ryan sketched, and the quiet table became a sanctuary, its tables filling with faces Eastside had turned away. Volunteers joined, their numbers growing like roots. Carla, a young artist inspired by Ryan's work, drove across counties to help, her paint-stained hands mixing dough. A retired Marine, who'd read of Mary in a local paper, arrived with a toolbox and a nod, his eyes carrying the weight of battles past. More followed. Neighbors, students, even a few of the boutique owners who'd once scoffed at Mary's vest. They cooked, cleaned, and painted murals on the pavilion's walls, their hands weaving a community where Mary's spirit lived. Luna and Ryan refused media attention, turning away cameras with a simple, "It's not about us." They wanted the quiet table to be about presence, about seeing, just as Mary had. Eastside began to shift, not in a grand sweep, but in small, stubborn ways. A child tugging his mother's sleeve asked, "Can we eat there too?" And she said, "Yes," her voice soft with surprise. A shopkeeper, once quick to sneer, dropped off a crate of apples, his eyes averted, but his gesture clear. Prejudice didn't vanish. Slurs still echoed in quieter corners, but the quiet table softened its edges, offering a space where differences sat side by side. Luna saw her mother in every bowl served, every smile exchanged. Ryan felt her in the murals, their colors bold like the drawings he'd once pressed to a window. The Whiston Fund's first gala, held a year later, filled the community center with light and purpose. Tables groaned under donated food, walls glowed with Ryan's paintings, each a story of resilience. The crowd, volunteers, neighbors, those who'd eaten at the quiet table, mingled, their voices a tapestry of gratitude. Ryan and Luna, now parents to a daughter named Mary, stood at the center, their hands clasped. Ryan unveiled the gala's heart, a painting of Mary Whiston, her broom scepter, a basket at her feet, a boy at a window, their silhouettes radiant against a city skyline. A plaque beneath read, "For Mary who saw us all." The room fell silent, then erupted in applause, some weeping, others nodding, the weight of her legacy tangible in the air. One morning, as snow dusted Eastside's rooftops, Ryan visited the Mercy home, now renovated but still heavy with memory. He stopped beneath the second-floor window, its glass new but carrying the ghost of his past. He touched his sketchbook, its pages worn, and whispered, "Thank you, Miss Mary." Luna joined him, their daughter in her arms, and they stood in silence, the snow falling like a benediction. The quiet table had grown, its programs now offering art classes, scholarships, safe spaces for kids with disabilities, and Black families. Veterans taught painting, children drew under open skies, and the pavilion buzzed with life, a testament to a woman who'd never sought glory. Eastside wasn't transformed. Prejudice lingered, streets still cracked, but it breathed differently. The Whiston Fund had planted seeds, and they grew in the hands that served, the eyes that met, the stories shared. Luna, watching a girl paint a sun on the pavilion's wall, saw her mother smile. Ryan, teaching a boy to hold a brush, felt her nod. Their daughter, toddling among the tables, carried her name and her fire. Mary's legacy wasn't in headlines or monuments. It was in the quiet table, in the people who sat there, in the truth that dignity was a right, not a reward. As spring returned, the pavilion stood firm, its murals brighter, its tables fuller. Ryan and Luna worked side by side, their love a steady flame, their daughter's laughter a song. They'd built more than a place. They'd built a promise, one Mary had written in every note, every basket, every sweep of her broom. The quiet table was her echo, her answer to a world that tried to erase her. And in its light, Eastside learned to see, not perfectly, but enough to start. Mary Whiston, the woman who tied a rope to a window, lived on, her legacy a city slowly, stubbornly waking to grace. Mary's story reminds us that a single act of kindness can ripple through the years, changing lives in ways we may never see. What moved you most? Her resilience, Ryan's art, or the quiet table's hope? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. We'd love to hear how this story touched you. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Through East Side's heart, your presence makes these stories live on. Subscribe for more tales of courage and connection, and we'll meet again soon with another story that lights the way.